He thought he knew every corner of the mountain he'd grown up on, every fallen pine, every stream, every silent place where the wind whispered its secrets. But he'd never seen the wall before, never imagined something so smooth and cold could rise out of the forest floor like a buried truth, finally forcing its way to the surface. And when he touched it, when the stone pulsed under his fingers like a heartbeat trapped in rock, he knew he'd found something that wasn't meant to be found at all. It started 3 days earlier, when the fog crawled down from the upper ridge, thick enough to swallow paths and blur the tree line into ghost shapes. Luke Carson woke before sunrise, breath misting in his cold cabin, Scout curled at his feet and twitching in a dream. The fire had gone out again. Winter was creeping fast this year. Luke rubbed warmth into his hands, stood, and stoked the stove until the fire caught, snapping softly in the darkness. Outside, the world was quiet enough to hear the frost settling on dead leaves. That kind of silence felt wrong, heavy, like the mountain was waiting for him to step outside. He shrugged into his coat, whistled for Scout, and stepped onto the porch. The forest beyond his cabin was swallowed in white fog, so thick he could barely see the old pine stump 10 feet away. Scout pressed close to his leg, uneasy. Luke had lived his whole life in the mountains, long enough to know when the silence wasn't natural. He scanned the fog. Nothing. No wind. No birds. No crunch of deer moving through brush. Just stillness. He debated going back inside, pretending morning chores could wait. But fog didn't scare him. The quiet didn't scare him either. Only what created the quiet. He walked toward the stream with Scout at his heels. Each step seemed to peel the world open a little wider, and the fog shifted around them like something alive. When they reached the stream bed, Luke felt the first wrongness. The water didn't move. It lay flat and glassy, frozen not by cold, but by something else, something that held it still like a paused memory. Scout whined, backing up. Luke knelt and touched the surface, dead still, but not cold. He stood quickly, pulse ticking. A folded piece of birch bark lay on a rock beside the water. That stopped him. The bark had been shaved thin, smoothed, and placed intentionally. Luke picked it up. Faint lines were etched into it, like a map, but messy, frantic. A long rectangle was drawn in the center. Around it, jagged lines scratched outward in desperate strokes. One word repeated 3 times near the bottom. Don't dig. Don't dig. Don't dig. Luke frowned. What the hell? The birch bark smelled like damp earth and pine resin. Scout barked at it once, sharply, as if recognizing something he couldn't. Luke folded it into his pocket, scanning the woods. Whoever left it couldn't have gone far. But the fog pressed too thick to see more than a few steps. He headed home slower than usual, turning every few minutes as if someone might be walking behind him. No one was, but the forest watched. That night, the wind picked up. Luke sat by the fire with the birch bark on his knee, trying to make sense of the strange, rectangular drawing. It didn't match any cabin, any old shed, any mining structure he knew. The warning, "Don't dig," echoed like a threat, or a plea. Scout refused to sleep until Luke moved the bark inside a drawer, out of sight. "You're jumpy tonight," Luke said softly. Scout huffed and pressed closer to him. By morning the fog was still thick but colder, sharper. Luke decided to follow the stream upward, past where he usually went. Something in him, fear or instinct or a pull he couldn't name, pushed him to go. He packed a small bag, slung his father's old hatchet at his belt, and headed into the trees. He walked for nearly an hour before reaching the place where the birch bark had been left. Scout sniffed the ground, circling. Luke knelt beside the stream again, hoping to find tracks, signs of movement, anything. What he saw instead made his breath hitch. The ground beside the stream had collapsed. A long, narrow trench split the earth, freshly broken, dark soil spilling like an open wound. Something metallic glinted inside. Luke approached slowly, Scout whining low behind him. The trench looked unnatural, not like erosion or fallen rock. It looked carved, deliberate. He braced himself on a root and leaned over, and he saw it, a wall, a smooth gray wall rising from beneath the forest floor, unearthed by whatever tore the ground open. Luke blinked hard, thinking he imagined it, but it was still there, flat, cold-looking, made of something like stone but too perfect, too seamless. It ran straight down the trench, disappearing into the soil on both ends. Luke jumped into the ditch, boots sinking into damp earth. He brushed dirt from the surface with trembling fingers. The wall wasn't rock. It wasn't concrete either. It was something in between, hard as iron, smooth like river stone, but whispering cold under his fingers like the breath of something buried. Scout barked, pacing above him. "It's okay," Luke called, though he didn't believe it. There were markings carved into the surface, faint, weathered, or maybe worn by something older than weather. 3 vertical lines crossed by a horizontal slash. A symbol. He felt his chest tighten. He'd seen a symbol like that once, on the sphere the donkey dragged to his cabin weeks before. That sphere had vanished during the storm that followed, pulled from his hands by a force he couldn't explain. He had tried to forget it, tried to move on, but the mountain didn't forget. He traced the symbol on the wall. The moment his fingers connected with it fully, the ground vibrated beneath him. Not violently, just enough to shake loose soil and send a shock through his bones. Scout barked wildly. Luke scrambled out of the ditch just as the wall pulsed once beneath the earth, a soft, dim glow moving under the stone like a heartbeat. Luke backed away fast, chest thundering. Scout pressed against his leg, tail tucked. The wall didn't move again. The forest returned to its suffocating quiet. Luke forced himself to breathe slowly. "We're leaving. Now." They walked fast. Luke kept glancing back, expecting the trees to shift or the ground to split again. They didn't, but the silence followed them like something alive. He didn't sleep that night. Every creak of the cabin, every snap of the fire made him flinch. He held Scout close, eyes wide open in the dim light, waiting for something he couldn't name. And just before dawn, he heard it. A low, mournful hum drifting through the forest. Not wind, not an animal. A vibration, the same one from the wall. Scout growled, pressing against the front door. Luke stood, grabbing his coat. The hum grew louder, then softer, like something calling to him from deep underground. He stepped outside, heart pounding. The hum faded instantly. Then, to his right, deep in the tree line, he heard something else. A voice, distant, ragged, human. "Help!" Luke froze. The voice came again, barely louder than the rustle of branches. Is someone there?" Luke's skin crawled. Scout barked twice, sharp, urgent. Luke moved toward the voice despite the dread curling tight in his stomach. "Hello?" he called. "Where are you?" A faint answer drifted back. "Here, behind, the wall." Luke's blood went cold. He stood rooted to the spot. The voice sounded weak, desperate, but wrong. Something off in the way the words cracked, the way they floated through the trees without echo or breath behind them. Scout whimpered, pushing his nose against Luke's leg, trying to pull him backward. But Luke couldn't ignore someone calling for help. Not in these mountains. Not when no one else would hear. He followed the voice. The forest darkened as he entered the deeper stretch north of the stream. Fog clung to the ground. The trees looked older here, bark twisted, branches clawing at the sky. Every step felt heavier, as if the earth were tugging at his boots. The hum returned, vibrating through his ribs. The trench appeared ahead, shadowed and still. The voice called again. "Please, don't leave." Luke stepped to the edge of the ditch and froze. Standing beside the wall, leaning against it, was a man, or what looked like one. He wore clothes torn to shreds, hair matted with dirt. His skin was pale, nearly gray. His eyes flicked open when Luke approached, and something in them didn't look human. Not fully. The pupils were too large, too dark, like he had forgotten how to gaze with human focus. Luke whispered, "Sir, are you hurt?" The man's lips cracked into a faint, painful smile. You came," Scout growled, low and furious. The man flinched, shrinking against the wall. "Please, don't let it close. Again." Luke blinked. "Close?" The man's breathing hitched. He pressed his palm weakly against the stone. "It opens at night, sometimes, when it calls. I tried to follow the others." Luke's pulse hammered. "Others?" The man closed his eyes. It showed them a place. And they went inside, and they didn't come back. Luke stepped back. "Inside? Inside what?" The man opened his eyes again. "They weren't supposed to dig," he whispered. Luke staggered. The birch bark map. "Don't dig, don't dig, don't dig." Luke crouched near the trench edge. "What's behind the wall? What's inside?" The man's expression twisted, not in fear, but in longing. "Warmth," he breathed. "Voices, memories, everything we lost." The wall behind him pulsed faintly. A tremor shivered through the soil. Luke recoiled. "No, don't touch it again." The man's hand slid downward, weak. "It wants you," he whispered. Luke's heart dropped. "What?" "Your blood," the man rasped. "It knows you." Luke felt ice pour through his veins. He scrambled backward, boots slipping on frost. "Who are you?" he choked out. The man lifted his head. "I was a seeker," he whispered, "before it took the rest." Luke ran. He didn't look back. Scout sprinted beside him, barking frantic warnings. The forest warped around them, wind twisting through the trees like something chasing them unseen. Luke didn't stop until the cabin came into view. He collapsed against the porch railing, chest burning, knees trembling. Scout nudged him, whining. Luke looked at his shaking hands, remembering the man's hollow eyes. The way his body sagged against the wall like he belonged to it. He whispered, "What did they dig up?" That night, Luke dreamed of the wall, of cracks opening in its smooth surface, of light spilling through like molten gold, of voices whispering his name. He woke drenched in sweat. The forest hum had returned, but this time it wasn't calling. It was warning. Luke stepped outside and stopped cold. Fresh footprints led from the edge of the forest toward his cabin. Not human, not animal, something in between. And at the end of the tracks, a smear of gray dust. Luke knelt, touching it. His chest seized. It was the same color as the man's skin. He whispered into the wind, voice shaking. He followed me. The forest didn't answer. It only breathed softly in the dark, waiting for the moment Luke would realize that the wall hadn't just awakened. It had opened something that wanted to find him. Night fell slowly over the mountain, sliding across the pines like a shadow testing the edges of the world. Luke sat by the window with Scout pressed against his leg, watching the tree line for even the slightest movement. The house felt too quiet, too still for everything he had just survived, like the mountain itself was holding a long, exhausted breath. The cut on his palm throbbed under the bandage, reminding him of the moment he'd pressed his blood into the wall. He tried to shake the memory, but it clung to him. Cold, heavy, stubborn as stone. He kept replaying the scream that wasn't a scream, the way the wall had shuddered under his touch, the way it had tried to trick him with his father's voice. The mountain outside was calm, but calmness didn't mean safety. Calmness was what happened when something ancient retreated to wait. Crowell had warned him that sealing the wall didn't erase what slept behind it, it only quieted it. Luke felt that truth vibrating behind his ribs like a second pulse. He wasn't sure if the danger was truly gone or simply crouched in the dark, watching. Scout lifted his head suddenly, ears perked. Luke felt the shift too, subtle, almost invisible. The forest's rhythm changed. A nightbird stopped mid-call. A squirrel scurried deeper into the brush. Even the wind hesitated. Luke stood slowly, heart kicking against his chest. "Not again," he whispered. He stepped onto the porch, Scout beside him, both staring into the tree line. Nothing moved, no shape, no figure. But the wrongness seeped back in, the same wrongness that had settled over the valley before the wall revealed itself. Something had changed again, and the mountain wanted him to know. The moon broke through the clouds, silvering the snow and casting long shadows across the clearing. Luke squinted. A shape stood near the stream, small, hunched, unmoving. Scout growled, but Luke held him back, narrowing his eyes. The figure didn't shift, didn't sway, didn't breathe. He stepped off the porch, boots crunching softly. With every few steps, the shape sharpened into something familiar, a deer, or what was left of one. It lay on its side, eyes open, body stiff, but there were no wounds, no blood, no tracks, just a stillness too perfect to be natural. Luke crouched beside the deer, studying it in silence. The animal's eyes reflected the moonlight like polished glass, but there was nothing inside them. No fear, no life, no final struggle. It looked like it had simply stopped being alive. Scout whined, refusing to come closer. Luke touched the deer's fur, cold but not frozen. The death had happened recently. He swallowed, dread coiling in his gut. "It's leaking," he whispered. The seal had held, but the rift behind the wall was pushing outward in other ways, testing the edges, searching for cracks, trying to breathe again. He backed away from the deer slowly, resisting the urge to run. Running wouldn't fix anything. Running wouldn't stop whatever was creeping through the forest. He needed answers, real ones, not rumors or warnings or half-remembered stories. He needed to understand what the underface truly was, what his ancestor had sealed, and what exactly the rift wanted from him. Crowell knew pieces, but not the whole thing. Luke's father had known something too. He felt it now, like a buried memory brushing against him from the dark. The wall hadn't chosen him randomly. It knew his family. Inside the cabin, Luke yanked open the old chest beneath his bed, the one filled with his father's notebooks, maps, and journals. He hadn't touched them since the funeral. His father's handwriting always felt like a weight he couldn't carry. But tonight, he forced himself to pull out the stack of leather-bound journals, their covers cracked and faded. Scout lay at his feet as Luke flipped through page after page of hunting notes, weather logs, trail markings, and scribbled thoughts. Most of it was ordinary. Until it wasn't. A page near the back stopped him cold. The page held a symbol, 3 vertical lines with a slash through them, the same symbol carved on the wall, the same symbol burned into his memory. Beneath it, his father had written shaky words. If the mountain ever calls, don't follow the voice. Follow the silence. Luke stared at the page, heart hammering. His father had known. He'd known the wall existed. He'd known its tricks. Maybe he'd even known Luke would face it someday. Luke closed the journal with trembling hands, breath tight. His father hadn't abandoned him. He'd tried to warn him. A sudden knock rattled the door. Luke jolted so hard he dropped the book. Scout snarled, planting himself between Luke and the door. Another knock, louder, urgent. Luke grabbed the hatchet beside the stove and approached slowly, breath sharp. "Who is it?" he called, voice barely steady. No answer. Scout barked, the sound echoing through the cabin. "Who's there?" Luke repeated. A pause, then a familiar rasp. "It's me." "Crowell." Luke dropped the hatchet and yanked the door open. The old man stood pale as snow, leaning heavily on his cane. He looked shaken in a way Luke had never seen. "You need to come with me," Crowell said, voice cracking. "Now." Luke grabbed his coat. "What happened?" Crowell swallowed hard, eyes unfocused. "The wall, it didn't just quiet down, it pushed." Luke felt the bottom drop out of his stomach. "Pushed what?" Crowell's voice turned hollow. "It's spreading." They hurried through the woods, the moonlight cutting through the trees like silver blades. Scout stayed close, ears twitching at every sound. As they neared the trench, Luke felt it, the hum again, faint but unmistakable, vibrating through the earth like a heartbeat waking from a long sleep. The trench looked different, wider, deeper. The soil had caved inward on both sides, like the ground had sagged. Luke jumped down and felt the vibration instantly, subtle but wrong. Crowell pointed a trembling finger. "Look." The wall, once smooth and seamless, now had a thin crack running down its center, glowing faintly with pale light. The anchors they'd placed still held, but the crack pulsed like something soft, pushing from the other side. Luke's breath hitched. "We didn't seal it," Crowell shook his head. "We sealed the door, but the pressure behind it is building." Luke stepped closer, hand hovering over the crack, but not touching. The air around it felt warm this time, warm like breath, like something alive pressing its face to the stone. Scout growled low. Crowell wiped sweat from his brow. "We bought time, that's all." Luke clenched his jaw. Time for what? Crowell's eyes found his with painful clarity. "For you to finish what your ancestors started." The words hit like a hammer. Luke backed away. "I don't know how." "You know more than you did yesterday," Crowell said, "and the mountain's done waiting." Luke sank into a crouch, fingers digging into his hair. He felt pulled in 2 directions, fear and duty, running and standing, disappearing and becoming something more. He thought of his father's journal, the symbol, the warning. Follow the silence. The wall whispered faintly, offering a low, seductive hum that curled like smoke around the edges of his thoughts. He forced himself to breathe evenly, to think. "If sealing it isn't enough," he said slowly, "maybe I need to understand what it is." Crowell nodded grimly. "Then you need to see the place your ancestor saw." Luke looked up sharply. "The rift?" "Not inside it," Crowell snapped. "You're not stepping past that wall, but there's a cavern deeper in the mountain, a chamber the first sealers used. Your granddad told me about it once, said it was where the mountain's memory lives. If anything can tell you how to stop this, it's there." Luke stood, breath steadying. "Where is it?" Crowell pointed toward the northern ridge. Beneath the oldest pine. There's an opening in the roots. You can crawl in. But it's dark, Luke. Dark in ways lanterns don't fix." Luke nodded, fear settling into determination like wet cement. "When do we go?" Crowell hesitated. "You go. Alone." Luke stiffened. "No." "Yes," Crowell said firmly. "The mountain chose you, not me. My part was reminding you who you are. The rest is yours." Luke shook his head. "If I go alone, I might not come back." Crowell's gaze softened. "If you don't go, none of us will come back." The truth of it hung heavy between them. Scout nudged Luke's leg gently, as if volunteering to go with him. Luke rubbed the dog's head, grateful. He took a lantern, extra matches, rope, and the knife Crowell had given him. Scout followed each movement with tense eyes. Luke knelt and pressed his forehead to Scout's. "Stay here. Guard Crowell. I mean it." The dog whined, but Luke nudged him back. This wasn't a journey for animals. This was something the mountain demanded from him alone. He turned toward the northern ridge, lantern swinging at his side. The trees seemed to shift as he walked, branches bending slightly toward him, guiding him upward. He didn't know if it was his imagination, but he didn't question it. The oldest pine towered at the ridge like a guardian that had seen centuries come and go without blinking. Its roots twisted out of the ground in thick, gnarled arcs, forming a dark opening between them. Luke crouched low, lantern held forward. The air inside the opening smelled like damp earth, stone, and something else, something metallic and ancient. He crawled in, feeling the soil scrape against his jacket and the roots close behind him. The tunnel narrowed, then widened, revealing a cavern lit by faint blue veins running along the rock walls like glowing rivers. Luke stood slowly, lantern flickering in his hand. The cavern felt alive. Not dangerous, just aware, like it had been waiting a long time for someone of his blood to return. In the center lay a stone pedestal carved with the same symbols as the wall. Luke approached cautiously. When he touched the pedestal, warmth spread through his palm, the same warmth he'd felt when the sphere had chosen him. A voice, not like the walls, not hungry, echoed gently inside his mind. "You carry the wound. You carry the key." He inhaled sharply. "What do you want from me?" The cavern answered not with words, but with images. His ancestor, bearded, weary, pressing his own bleeding hand to the same pedestal. A younger version of the wall glowing bright. A shadow behind it, enormous, shifting like smoke, trying to take shape. His ancestor, whispering a vow before sealing the rift. "Let my line pay the price so the mountain may live." Luke staggered back, breath trembling. His ancestor hadn't sealed the rift with strength. He had sealed it with sacrifice, not death. Something deeper, something Luke now understood with terrifying clarity. He had to finish the vow. Luke placed both hands on the pedestal, feeling the cavern pulse with his heartbeat. "Take what you need," he whispered, "but leave the valley alone." The cavern brightened, blue veins flaring as light wrapped around his arms. Pain lanced through him, sharp, burning, but not cruel. Memories he'd held too tightly. His father's last day, the loneliness, the ache, were lifted gently from him, not stolen, but accepted. The mountain wasn't hungry. It was asking for what weighed him down. When the light faded, Luke stood trembling, breath steady, heart lighter than it had been since childhood. He whispered, "The rift is sealed." Outside, the mountain exhaled. The forest shifted back into life, and Luke Carson walked out of the cavern carrying no ghosts, only purpose.